Hi Ash, how are you?
I am good, thank you, Josh.
Thanks so much for joining us today. I can't wait for this conversation.
Great, yeah, me too. I'm really excited to speak to you today.
So for those sort of watching this, Ash and I have known each other for a little while through the learning industry in London. Ash has got a fantastic story, and I've been really looking forward to recording this episode of The Future is Human. But Ash, why don't you kick us off? You tell us a little bit about yourself. You grew up in Birmingham. I guess through the 80s and 90s, and discovered online commerce, not only sort of at an early age, but early in the industry. But tell us a little bit about growing up for you and how that sort of shaped you.
Yeah, absolutely, Josh. I was born in Birmingham, the inner city of Birmingham, and born to second generation immigrant parents. And immigrant parents are always pushing their children to become graduates of certain types of industry. So either a doctor, lawyer, engineer, or a failure. And I was the failure in this case. I didn't go to university in the end. I dropped out of college. But I grew up in the inner city, always thinking to myself, how can I make the most of myself as an individual? And I always saw a lot of poverty around me. So at the age of 11 or 12, I started a paper round. At the age of 16, I started selling CDs door to door until I realized it was illegal to do that. And then I was like, oh, can't do that anymore. And I always wanted to do something myself and use my own creativity to do something. And then at 18, I dropped out of college and I decided to build a website. And it was just coming out 56K modem days. I don't know if anyone remembers those, but you plug in your computer to the phone socket and it will engage the phone socket, and you have a 56K modem. You can actually go on the World Wide Web. And one of my friends his parents used to own a shoe business. And we decided, why don't we sell these shoes on the internet? And I had no idea how to do any of this stuff. So I went to read all about HTML coding, and I started to learn coding, and I built this website by myself. And I enlisted some help, and there's an e-commerce website doing transactions online. And whilst I was at this time in Birmingham, I was in my parents' attic, and my siblings gave me a birthday card, and it said future.com millionaire on it, and they were laughing at me as they gave it to me. And they gave it to me, and I was like, yeah, good luck with that. And I was like, oh, I'm going to do this thing. And then, as you know, the story back in 2014 when JustEat IPO'd, my sister was the first one to call me and say, oh, okay, hello. Yeah, I see that card inspired you, you know. So that was kind of my upbringing. I really was, I think I was super lucky because my parents I'm part of 4 siblings, and my other 2 siblings, they went off to university and did their master's degrees and the computer science degrees and theology, and they became, professionals. And I was like, hey, it's okay, Ash, whatever you do, it's going to be okay. Just do something that you like and enjoy. And I had that unconditional love to be able to say, actually, I can do what I want. And when I failed in my little projects or little hustles, my parents were okay with it. Like, oh yeah, it's just Ash, let him carry on. As long as he's doing something, it's okay. And so I kind of had this kind of, what I'd say, early ability to have a growth mindset and deal with failure in a different way compared to what most kids generally have, especially from my culture.
I was just about to ask you a little bit more. I'm glad that's a perfect segue. Actually, I wanted to ask you. Second generation immigrant family, a lot of poverty around you. Expectation that doctor, lawyer, etc., etc. What was the drive? There's an entrepreneurial spirit there that seemed different from the environment that you were growing up in.
I asked my mom the other day, what was my first career choice when I was young? And my mom turned around to me and said, you wanted to be a bus driver. I was like, why did I want to be a bus driver, Mom? She goes, because you told me that every time someone put money into the bus, you wanted to get that money. And I used to think that the bus driver used to get that money. I was like, wow, he's getting loads of money, that bus driver.
Makes sense.
I was like, yeah, it made sense to me. And I was like, yeah, I want to be a bus driver. That's a pretty cool thing to do. You get all that money, you just drive around, get money.
Drive around.
I went to the local grammar school, and I found myself, I came from a poorer background from most people that I was with. And I noticed that they're all being dropped off by their father and their mother in really nice cars. And I had to pay for my own bus pass and jump on the bus and go there. And I had a different experience. I couldn't go on any ski trips. My parents couldn't afford to send me to go to ski trips. And I always said to myself that actually I want to have that ability to be able to do that for my own children one day when I get the chance. And then also to realize that having access to money will enable me to get the experiences And I'm a very experiential type of person. I like to gain experiences. And it wasn't ever, some people have this aspiration of, I want this car, I want this house. And it was never that. It was always the experiences. It was always, I want to travel to this country. I want to go on a ski trip. I want to try doing this new thing. But also it was a lot of my friends, they call me Helpful Ash. And I've always wanted to help people. And so when you're an entrepreneur or you naturally want to do something good, helping is the first point. It's not making money, it's helping. From there, I realized actually when I'm helping people get what they want, I can also get what I want as well.
What an awesome lesson, right? I mean, that is the spirit of entrepreneurship right there. And for those in big organizations, the spirit of intrapreneurship, that just desire to help by helping solve problems that people have with something that's valuable, as a solution. So that spark was there when you were quite young. A little bit, fast forward a little bit. So you found yourself at JustEat. Now, for those around the world who might not be as familiar with the JustEat brand specifically, JustEat started off as a small website to order takeaway from local takeaway shops. You can probably tell the story a bit better than I can, Ash. But is a massive business now, and in most countries owns a number of the local brands. So tell us about when you got involved at JustEat and sort of briefly how those 3 or 4 years, I think it was, shaped who you are now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I got approached by Jesper Buch, the founder of JustEat, back in London, and he was like, Ash, I want to have a chat with you about a new role in this new company called JustEat. And I was like, okay, what does it do? And it's like, we sell takeaway online. And that's what he said. It's like, oh, really? We're a takeaway platform. And I'm like, really? That's not going to work. So I decided to go and have a coffee with him. And I just sat down and had a coffee with him, and he started explaining to me. And I loved his passion and his charisma and what he was talking about. And they'd already done some of this stuff in Denmark. JustEat was already alive in Denmark. And that conversation was, Jesper was like, hey, Ash, I'd like you to join JustEat as the marketing director, because I think you're kick-ass. I can see the type of work you've done, and you're kind of a cool guy, and we want someone like you to be joining JustEat. And I was like, actually, I need to think about it. I don't think JustEat is in the right place for me right now, because I don't think you've got enough restaurants on your platform. And I was in my early thinking. I was like, oh, well, once you get to about 1,000 restaurants, let's have a chat. And then 3 months later, he called me again. I said, Ash, we've got 1,000 restaurants, and would you like to join? And I, at that moment, went home. I picked up my 6-month-old daughter, put it up in the air and said, this better IPO. No, I didn't say that. I said, this better work. And I resigned on that day. And my old company, which is a corporate company where I was working there for 5 years, building a marketing team with digital understanding, they got everyone around and said, hey, Ash has now decided to move on, and he's now leaving to go to a online takeaway portal called JustEat. And everyone looked at me and went, what is this? And you got to remember, this was back in 2006-07, when there was no iPhone. But I took the opportunity, and then the rest was history, as I say. So I became the first marketing director of JustEat. I was the one-man marketing band, so I pretty much did everything. And the early days were very much bootstrapping mindset. We weren't looking to get funding. We were just looking to build a business, a real business. And then a year in, we changed CEO, and the whole idea was, let's grow this thing now. Let's grow. And we raised £10.5 million from Index Ventures. And as the marketing director, I took £3.5 million for myself to do the marketing, and did the first TV campaign in JustEat. And the learnings were intense all the way through. And then 3.5 years later, we built a brand, we built opportunity, all the partnerships I was leaning on in the early days that no one wanted to partner with us. Now, all of a sudden, wanted to do partnerships with us because we were a TV brand and we've got a budget to do something. So there's going to be a lot of people who say something's not going to work, and there's going to be a lot of naysayers in everyone's life. But I took the punt, took the opportunity, and then, of course, in 2014, the IPO for 1.5 billion. We all had a great opportunity to take shareholdership in that company and be part of that growth.
Yeah, well, I mean, what a great story. I heard you mention that in there, like there was a real bootstrapping mentality, how do you think a bootstrapping sort of mentality is relevant to people building their careers these days?
Well, how does bootstrapping work? Well, in the book I've written, I talk about money, and in money is like a resource that you can have, or you can use it to add fuel to the fire, but you need to create the fire in the first place. And bootstrapping is creating that fire. You can't use money to create the fire. You need to have the fire in the first place and then add money onto it to fuel that fire. So the mindset of bootstrapping is more about being lean and having less resources and becoming more resourceful. So bootstrapping allows you to be lean, to test the waters, to try things on a smaller scale, so that when you do things on a bigger scale, it actually has a bigger impact. So it compounds very well. So example of that would be bootstrapping. We don't have any money to spend money on getting traffic to our website. But why don't we spend time looking at the conversion rate on our website and optimizing that? Because we can control that, we can change that. Now all of a sudden we've got more money to advertise, when more people are coming to the website, the conversion rate's gone up by 0.2%. That actually has a massive impact on the bottom line.
Yeah.
There's so many things you can do as a bootstrapper.
Yeah, no, it makes so much sense. I love that distinction between having resources and being resourceful, and bootstrapping is about actually being resourceful, and not necessarily needing a big budget or a lot of resources to make an impact or get going. And I think that's so relevant in terms of being part of the future workforce. Companies are looking for people to be resourceful. I mean, particularly in 2020. I think there's so much value in that bootstrapping mindset. So you left Just Eat, and then made this what to me sounds like, and I'd like you to maybe peel this back a little bit, quite a big jump across into the world of people development, which is where you and I have met, and co-founded a business called Uhubs, which is in the space of virtual learning. And it's been a pleasure to get to know that between you and I, and help out a little bit with that as well. But also then parallel to that, write this fantastic book, which I want to talk more about, called the Unfair Advantage. And you don't know this, Ash. We've been running free live stream sessions to early talent and future talent all over the world since COVID hit. So we do all of our client work, which obviously our clients pay us to do, and we work in partnership very closely with them. And then we've been sort of saying, look, we have so much access to so much IP, and young people need some of this information now at mass. And so we've been running live stream free sessions to grads all over the world. And those, like in the first sort of 90 days of COVID, those live streams went to 1,000 grads from like 200 companies or something. It was great. One of those sessions, we talked about 7 things that you can do to develop yourself post-COVID. That period hasn't arrived yet, it appears. But sort of on the other, like, what do you do now? And we gave them 7 things and 7 books to read. And the Unfair Advantage was absolutely one of them. And one of the 7 tips was, use this time to go back through your life and work out what your unfair advantage is. But before we dive into the sort of philosophies of the unfair advantage, tell me about the leap from kind of tech, fast growth, to then saying, I know what I'll do. I'll get into people.
Yeah.
What happened?
Well, I think this is a really good question, actually. What happened was that I realized that business is people. What I realized was that the reason why I became successful in my career was because I was a lifelong learner, and I like to learn and build my skills. And I realized that my skills and my kind of strengths were emotional intelligence and working with other people and collaborating and problem solving and being creative, and all the skills that the UN talk about the future of the workforce. Yeah. And I thought to myself that I've coached and built several different marketing departments, and I have many people coming back to me saying, Ash, you're one of the best bosses, I really like working with you. And I realized that that's really what I like doing. Whenever I was in my roles, in senior roles, as much as I was a tactical, strategic person, I really enjoyed building people up. I really enjoyed coaching people, building them up, especially in the marketing and in the tech industry. So how can I scale that? And then Uhubs is one of those ideas where how can we scale the impact of helping more people build themselves up, especially in the digital realm where there's a massive skills shortage of digital skills. And one of the biggest kind of central ideas to that was we learn a lot from people. Yeah. But we spend a lot of time listening and reading books from people who are really far ahead of us. So Warren Buffett, Mark Zuckerberg, even speakers, these guys are really far ahead in what they've learned. I give an example to many people. There's no point me asking Warren Buffett how to get invoice paid in a business because he's so far ahead. It's the wrong question to ask him. And what I realized is that the real practical and impactful thing that can happen with Uhubs was, how do we get people who are 6 to 7 or 10 steps ahead of somebody, and how can other people learn from them? Because they will give much more practical knowledge to the person asking, and they can implement that knowledge and make an impact in their life.
And then in a similar vein, I think the other great thing that you've done in the areas that are helping the future workforce, in my opinion, is go on to publish the unfair advantage. So tell me, like, tell me what's the concept of the unfair advantage? Like, what's the core kind of philosophy? What's it about?
Yeah, the core philosophy, I suppose, about the unfair advantage was I used to sit down with when JustEat IPO'd, I decided to become an angel investor. So I did some dabbling in angel investing, and I had so many entrepreneurs sit in front of me pitching their ideas. And that's where Hassan, my co-author, was also involved, and he was one of my associates. And we sat down and we listened to so many pitches. And every time we listened to a pitch, we realized that there was something unique about the entrepreneur that we really wanted to invest in. And we couldn't label what that was. They're really good, they've got experience, but they haven't got experience. What is it? And then we labeled it the unfair advantage. They've got an unfair advantage. But what is an unfair advantage? So an unfair advantage is a unique set of circumstances, assets, or a situation that puts you ahead of the competition in what you're trying to achieve. An unfair advantage is your personal story extrapolated so that your unique story is what makes who you are as an individual. And rather than focusing on your weaknesses, you're focusing on your strengths to achieve something.
Yeah.
And that's really the essence of the unfair advantage.
So it's that merging of what have been the, I guess, formative circumstances and situations and events in your life. How have they influenced you? What have you learned? How have they shaped you in terms of what you value? But also you mentioned assets. Like what skills did those circumstances or events give you? And then that unique combination of those is almost like, like it's talked about authenticity, right? That's your authentic self.
Yep.
And that is how those things come together how those things come, not just what they are, but then how they combine.
Yeah.
No one can replicate.
Exactly.
Right? And so those extrapolated and then deployed is your advantage, and it is unfair in the sense that nobody else can create. Really, no one can create it. So it is unfair, and that is your advantage.
Exactly, and you've got it spot on there, Josh. You've really encapsulated that. If you want to take it in even more simple terms, it's your unfair advantage is the ability to know when you have a tailwind versus a headwind when you're riding down the road.
Interesting.
Having a headwind, if you're doing a project, you're struggling and you don't know what your unfair advantage is. But when you have an unfair advantage, you have tailwind behind you, so you're actually moving faster. So when you know that you've got a tailwind, because you know what your unfair advantage is, you can move faster, and therefore you don't have to look at the next person, because they've all got their unfair advantages and they're doing things in different ways. And the reason why I wrote the book was to empower people, to make them grateful for what they have and not what they don't have, because that's what society is about, being unique and diverse.
Yeah, it is. And through history, those who have had an impact on the world, they're almost always unique characters, men and women. There's almost always, you read the biography, a really interesting story, right? It's almost like they knew about this, but didn't tell anyone, or didn't consciously know this. But there's almost always a story, and you go, that makes so much sense. Not that they landed in their success or landed being really impactful on the world, but you can see how it came together. So there's the uniqueness as always, as being valuable, has always been there. But diversity these days, I mean, organizations want diversity mainly because the business case has been proven. So it's not just ethically a great thing to do, but the research has now shown that it improves bottom line. So be it ethical or financial, whatever your case is, diversity is a good thing. And I wonder what are your thoughts on how helping people discover their unfair advantage might help the case for diversity in organizations?
We've had a lot of people from the corporate background and a lot of graduates read the book and go, actually, I'm really understanding this because I can see where I'm really grateful for what I do have and how I can apply that. And my difference is actually celebrated. So I think in organizations, it's about celebrating difference. It's about celebrating diversity, and it's making it more inclusive and having a belonging. So there's a lot of things that can change. And I think that happens right from the pipeline of how you recruit people in the first place. You know, so there's quite a few companies now who are removing the degree qualification. You no longer have to be a graduate. You just have to be somebody who's smart, go through the interview process, and actually you qualify for this organization. In itself, that's going to create more diversity, because people from different backgrounds, not similar types of backgrounds, go to university. And there's similar types of people who go there, especially from a socio-economic background. I think when you talk about diversity, we always talk about, you know, race or gender or sexuality, but we very rarely talk about socio-economic. And I think diversity happens, you can increase your diversity by just looking at socio-economic, because there you're going to find people from working class backgrounds and middle class backgrounds, other backgrounds who have a different view of life, but might not look like you and might not talk like you. When people identify their unfair advantage, within the unfair advantage, people also want to identify what's their purpose for life. And most grads and most new people are coming to work and looking for working with organizations where they're more purpose-driven, not just work-driven. So how can you make it more purpose-driven? How can you make it so that people want to grow? And success is no longer just climbing the ladder in an organization. The success is more about growth. And everyone's unfair advantage is unique. So if an organization show by teaching people the unfair advantage concept, say, actually, this is all about you. It's not just about the company, it's about you, because we want the best you so that you can be the best for our customers and best for our company. It always starts with the people. And when you start to let people understand that you're invested in their growth, it makes a massive difference on retention, on outcome, on innovation, on so many different things. Yeah. So I think it's understanding that and grasping that concept and making it more inclusive.
So tell us a little bit more about, like, what are the different parts? What could be the different sort of parts or components of someone's unfair advantage?
Yeah, so we break down the main components in the MILES framework. That stands for money, intelligence, location, luck, education, expertise, and status. So there's 5 pillars in the MILES framework. But underneath all these 5 pillars sits mindset. So before you start to understand what your unfair advantage is, before you even read the book, you've got to have a growth mindset. You've got to have a mindset that allows you to open your mind to see what you do have going for you rather than what you don't have going for you. Because a lot of people have this victim mindset. Oh, I don't know, I didn't go to this right place, I was born in the wrong place. And there's always going to be something that you pick off. So having the right mindset is really important. So once you've got this kind of aspect of growth mindset, you want to grow and you want to develop yourself, you need to look back into your life and go, where in my life, so let's take money as an example. Money is a great one, because having money is brilliant. You need it. It's important. But then for me, growing up in a poorer background, having less money made me more resourceful. That's what made me a growth hacker. That's what made me bootstrap. Intelligence, let's take intelligence as a pillar. A lot of people, I mean, at school, I went to the local grammar school. I was okay, I was an average kid, but in the grammar school, I wasn't the top kid. But what I was very good at, when people used to say to me is that, when I go back to Birmingham, whenever I meet up with my friends, like, Ash, you know what? You're like the glue amongst us. I realized that I've got this thing called emotional intelligence. I didn't know what it meant. You can't measure it. You don't know what it is, but that's the skill I had. So teamwork and emotional intelligence. And nothing in life happens by yourself. You have to work in a team. And this is another thing, you know, unfair advantage. It's not just you by yourself. You have to think about the team as well. When you think about the team, you start to compound your unfair advantages. If you have an unfair advantage, someone else has an unfair advantage. You're compounding some unfair advantage, but you're extrapolating out further unfair advantage, which is why in startups and businesses, it's better to have a co-founder, because you've got 2 sets of unfair advantages. Which is why, you know, when I start companies and when I do any major project, you would notice that I do it with a partner. Even the book is written with my co-author. So we all have unfair advantages that we combine together to extrapolate. So you've got to know who you are first to know what adds to that recipe to extrapolate the success of a project potentially. Location, look, so I was born in Birmingham. Birmingham is a manufacturing industry. At the age of 19, when I sold that e-commerce website, I picked up a rucksack, and to my parents' demise, I decided to move to London. London is where it was all happening. I had to move, I had to take the courage. I moved to London to make the opportunity for me. And that was the big pivotal point for me. If I stayed in Birmingham, probably wouldn't have had the same opportunities or access to opportunities.
Right.
Luck, being in the right place at the right time. There were so many serendipity moments in my life where I bumped into people, I met people, just getting an opportunity to work with JustEat was serendipity. I never really made out that I wanted to do that. I always had a vision to be successful, but never to do that. So being in the right place at the right time. So the way to do that is to go and increase the surface area of opportunity for luck and taking advantage of it. I meet people who say, what's luck? Well, luck two people can see luck in different ways. It's who takes advantage of it that will then say, recount it as, oh, that was a bit of good fortune, that.
Yeah.
Took advantage of it.
Yeah.
Right? And when I did the research for the book with Hassan, I realized that all the top entrepreneurs and all the major successful people who are super successful mention the word luck or good fortune in their success somewhere. But it's really unpacked. And so we include that in the framework to say, actually, there is that element. And how do you create that element? How do you take advantage of that luck?
If I can jump in and say, I think what's great about including luck in the philosophy is just recognizing that it has a place, and that's okay. So, you can't just write off someone's story to say, oh, they were lucky. No, they weren't. They came across luck, took it, and it also combined with another number of other unique
elements to make, and the stars align, and you think, oh wow, this is cool. Absolutely, it's just being aware of it and not denying it. I think if you deny it and just say you're the genius and it's just you, then you also deny yourself growth opportunities and also deny yourself the opportunity of serendipity and experiences in life. So luck was very important. Education expertise. So, I'm always talking about it from my angle, but when you talk to Hassan, my co-author, he'll talk about it from his angle, because he went to university and he did all the studying and all of that stuff. But I didn't go to university, so I never had a degree. So whenever I was in a workforce or a company, I always felt like I had to prove myself. And I was always committed to do anything. So if I was going to do photocopying, I'll be the best photocopier in the world. If I was going to make tea, I'm going to make the best tea in the world. It didn't matter. I was committed to do anything. I didn't feel entitled, basically. I felt like I'm here, I've got the opportunity, I've got access to the opportunity, I'm going to do the best. So that entitlement went away from me. I didn't feel like, right, I need to only apply for a job that gives me this much because therefore that values the fact that I've done a degree. Well, actually, I don't care because it doesn't matter to me. I'm there because I can do the job and I think I can add value to it, and I'm going to work hard, and I'm a fast learner, so I can pick up things quickly. But then expertise is really important. So on the flip side of that, I had expertise. I built skills in SEO and PPC and website building and app building, and I built up all these kind of raw skills, and I got lucky by the fact that these skills were the most in-demand skills. When I was growing up, I never thought to myself that I'm going to be head of SEO or head of new media. The jobs didn't exist, right? A lot of jobs don't still exist now that our kids are growing up. They don't know what jobs they're going to be doing because they don't exist yet. So you build your expertise up, and the key with building expertise up is to compound your expertise. Never to just say you do one thing and that's it. To compound it, because the world is changing so fast. You need to have lots of different skill sets. So as you start building yourself, you're building yourself a complete person, but you have a core trunk, and my core trunk is marketing and sales. And then the final part of the Miles framework is status. This is quite an important one because status drives a lot of value in the world, people.
And maybe this one sounds at the outset a little bit controversial. Like it's, oh, I've got to have status, but I don't have status, therefore I can't be successful. But yeah, tell us. I don't think that's quite where status is coming from in the nature of this. Tell us a little bit more.
When people are recruiting, they're looking for status. You went to a good university, had a top degree. That's kind of status. But status is also the way you talk, the way you dress, the people you hang around with, the sports you play, the things you do that kind of connect you to an organization or opportunity. That's also part of your status. And majority of your status is based on who you know, as well as your network, your network is very, very important. So if you have a higher status, you're more likely to have a bigger network who want to work with you in the perceived eyes of value. But what I found through my time coming to London and working with so many people in senior roles and amazing people, I found that everyone suffers from one of the things that I used to suffer from, which is imposter syndrome. I felt like I shouldn't be where I am. A lot of times people feel like they shouldn't have that status of, I can't go for that job because I don't have the skills and therefore that status is too high for me. Well, it's not, because it's a job title. What's most important about status is not what other people perceive you as, is the story that you tell yourself in your own mind, your internal status. Your internal status is your confidence and your charisma, it's yourself. And it's not to do with who you are from the outset, it's from who you become. Yeah. And the stories that you tell yourself are really important. And we need to just be realistic about that, because it does make a difference. Your accent does make a difference, and which school you went to makes a difference. It does make a difference to some people in the world. But how do you overcome that, and how are you aware of that? And being aware of that is really important, which is why when you encapsulate the unfair advantage, your personal story comes out to say, actually, I've had a lot of adversity in my life, and I'm here. and I know how to overcome adversity, and resilience is the thing that we need to teach our kids, for example. And that's really important. So
Yeah.
your status is a funny one. It creates a lot of banter and conversations around it. But ultimately, what's most important is what's actually happening in your head.
And I think that I'm so glad we can wrap up the Miles framework there. A little bit like luck. I love that status in this philosophy is just acknowledged, and not acknowledged in a way that says, oh, you've got to have status, and unless you don't, forget your goals and dreams and whatever. It's actually just saying, no, we all have status, and it's built up through events and experiences through our life, and you can build it as well. Build it in an authentic way that is useful to you, that gives you a tailwind, not a headwind. But the most important one is actually the one that goes up inside your head, because that's the one that comes out. Just to wrap up on the unfair advantage, I'm so glad you wrote the book. It reminded me a little bit of Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers.
Yes,
there's some similar kind of ideas. This principle of the outliers is. Bill, I listened to a really great podcast with Bill Gates, and Gladwell talks about Gates and the outliers as well. There was a luck element for Gates. Right place, right time, right school, the right computers, the right amount of computers, etc. At the right time in the computer's evolution in the world.
Yep.
That wasn't all. That's not the full explanation of his impact on the world. But my goodness, had a massive role. I really like this idea of that people have a story. Let's extrapolate the story. Everyone's story is unique, and let's play to that and build upon it. And the other thing I really like about what you said there was around compound unfair advantages. I hadn't actually thought of that. It makes so much sense. But it's not just about yours. And then if you're building a team or a career, well, who can you get around you? Let's move on now just to a couple of final questions, and thinking sort of forward in the future. We've done a substantial piece of research in the last month called the Future Talent Pulse. 65% agree, and a further 22% agree that COVID-19 will help create long-term change and innovation in how early talent training and development is designed and delivered. So 87% either agree or strongly agree that the world will be different when it comes to learning and development. And what's your perspective about the future of learning?
Learning has become taken over by schools and universities. But when it comes to the world of work, learning is very different. It's more about performance, it's more about skills. It's not about education per se. And sometimes the word learning is kind of bandied around in a way that doesn't make sense, because you can learn something and it doesn't have an impact in the business or yourself. It's just you're learning to pass an exam or learning to do something that doesn't make sense. So I use the word more performance. So how does performance change of new people coming into the workforce and early people coming to the workforce? Because of course, learning is part of that, but then performance requires application of the learning. It requires the reflection of the learning. It requires the ability to be around other people. I think one of the major disadvantages that early talent will have of COVID now is that they're not going to have the same opportunity to be around experienced people in a meeting room or in the office to be able to learn from them. And this is where the office environment has always been wrong, because the office environment is for learning, is for performance. And then going away is to work, and you go away to work. It's the other way around. So when you go to the office, you should be going there to learn and to perform and create opportunities and brainstorm and do things, rather than go there to just work. Because you can work anywhere you want. And I suppose the office environment for early talent is going to change. And how do we create that opportunity with our social distancing? Things will change, but how do you recreate that kind of just being in the atmosphere and the experience? With learning now, it's so accessible. Knowledge is everywhere. So by the time you come to do a course, so many people have read books about negotiation and sales. So you need to compound what they've already learned on top of what they've done. I've heard a lot of things about learning with early development. It's either too complex, or it's too basic, or it's too run-of-the-mill, and everyone's learning it. It's not personalized enough. And I think personalized learning is going to be the key thing going forward. How do you personalize that learning going forward? What are you actually good at? What are you not so good at? And how do you double down on the strengths rather than the weaknesses and develop those? So if you're good at creative stuff, then how can you learn creativity? Well, you're not going to learn it by watching a video. You're going to learn it by being creative. Young people are coming from an environment where everything's pushed onto them. And when you get into the world of work, there's a little bit of push onto them when they start, but then after that, you're left by yourself. So you have to do a lot of pulling. So you have to pull information out, pull knowledge out. And the best way to pull it is from the people who are already in the organizations. If they've got a system already in place to allow you to capture this, people's knowledge, that flip needs to happen at some point. How do you flip that point where people are pulling stuff out with their personalized journey versus you're pushing it to them and saying, you need to do this because that's the process.
Yeah.
And then everyone feels like sheep going, yeah, we're used to this. This is what we normally do. And then all of a sudden, after a year and a half, they're in the real world of work and they don't know what went wrong in their career.
Yeah, and that's going to be really important in the future, isn't it? Those few points you made there around how do you recreate or sort of reimagine that sort of person-to-person learning.
Yeah.
Being in a meeting and just listening to a manager, or being able to the hallway conversations, like the by the way conversations between the meeting room back to the desk.
Yeah.
So it's like rich of information, and well, not necessarily information, but rich in context. It puts the information from the meeting, gives it some meaning, but then also teaching people to be resourceful, which gets back to that kind of bootstrapping mentality, maybe that we talked about at the beginning of our conversation. We could talk all day. We need to wrap it up. Thank you so much for making the time. We are going to do the top 10 though. We like to do this.
Oh, go for it.
Let's go. Number 1, favorite food.
Pho, which is a Vietnamese soup.
Oh yes. Oh, Vietnamese. It's been so long. Favorite drink.
Favorite drink? Ooh, I do like a latte, a smooth latte. But it's got to be single shot and it's got to be the right beans, but it's got to be smooth.
Oh, not too many conditions. That's good. Favorite exercise?
Ooh, I do like a bit of spinning now and then.
Very good. Favorite band?
Ooh, that's a good one actually. I've never really thought of this band. I've really thought of it as music because I never really think of a band behind it.
Yeah. Oh.
So I don't really have a favorite band. Music is what I like and different types of music. So yeah.
Oh, brilliant. Most influential book you've ever read?
Ooh, okay.
Why not?
So there's so many great books, but if I was to pick one, The Magic of Thinking Big by DJ Squats.
What a great book.
And that was the first book I ever picked up in self-help and development. It's the first ever book I read. It had no front cover on it in my house. I don't know where I found it from. And I looked through it and I read it and I was like, wow, and that's kind of blew my mind.
It's one of the personal development classics.
Yeah.
You know.
It's old school, but it's good.
It's old school, but what a great one. Best career moment.
Best career moment. Ooh, I have so many actually.
I know. That's why I want to know the best one.
I don't know. I can't classify the best one. Best career moment. Best career moment was to know that we built something at JustEat when it IPO'd. We were always dreaming of it being big, but not as big as a billion.
That's great. If you could change one thing in the world, what would it be?
Yeah, big one. There's lots of things, but I'd like to change. I'd like to make the gap between the rich and poor smaller. I'd like to change inequality.
If you could have dinner with one person, who would it be, dead or alive?
Dead or alive, it would be Muhammad Ali.
Oh,
Muhammad Ali.
Interesting choice.
I like boxing. I like boxing a lot, and I love boxing, and I'd really love to understand his mindset and how he got through all the challenges.
Right. To question 9, which is far more practical actually in day to day. What was the last gift you gave someone?
The last one I gave was a book of Rumi poems to one of our experts on the Uhubs.
Oh, brilliant. And last question, what are you most proud of?
I would say finishing and getting the book out and having an impact in the world. You know, Josh, we get so many emails from around the world. Recently, the book was translated into simplified Chinese and it's in Taiwan. And we had someone in Taiwan send us an email going, hey, this is amazing. And it's a completely different culture. I've never been to Taiwan before. I don't know how it works out there. And it's like, wow, someone's really connecting with what we've written here in the UK and the concept of the unfair advantage in Taiwan. So we get emails from everyone and anyone. So the impact of the book. So for me, the proudest moment is be able to finish the book and to bring it to the world. It took 4.5 years to do. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. We think starting companies is hard, but writing a book, getting it completed was really, that's a proud moment.
That's fantastic. I mean, before COVID hit, I was seeing it in airports everywhere. Between here and Asia and Australia and around Europe, it was kept popping up. I was like, there's Ash again. So congratulations again. Thanks so much for your time today. It's been a delight having another conversation, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you very much, Josh. Bye-bye.